the rhythm, the way it's syncopated, the way the emphasis is on the four and the and of the four, you know. It's a simplistic style of music that's so pretty. And the simplicity in it is what makes it so unique. My musical father was Louis Armstrong. I started hanging around Preservation Hall in 1968 when I was 6 years old. I was there every night. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me and he talks with me. He tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. Good evening, folks. My name is William Smith. I'm a New Orleans traditional jazz trumpet player. In my house, as a kid, there was a lot of gospel music played. My mom was the president of the choir, St. Luke AME Church, for over 25 years. She helped found that church, so in my house, there was a lot of gospel music. There was also other music, but mainly gospel. My mom had 10 kids, okay? So I've got brothers and sisters who are old enough to be my parents. So by the time I came along, I was the 10th. My sister was already married and gone. So as an effort to sort of help my mom, she sort of took me. So I was partially raised by my sister. I grew up in the house with her. 924 Orleans. It's the French Quarter. It's one block off of Rampart on Orleans. So I grew up in the quarter. My brother-in-law, John Kid Simmons, he's my inspiration. He introduced me to the trumpet, not thinking that I would ever take it seriously, but just sort of as something to do. My brother-in-law was a real enthusiast. You remind me of him in so many ways, because he's from London. Well, he's from just outside of London. But he moved here with a whole migration of European musicians. He and my sister didn't have any kids then, right? So we've got one son now who's my nephew. And he'd be practicing every day. And I was a little kid and I'd just be standing. He'd say, "What you want? What you want? Get out of here." And so finally, he had a few trumpets. And so finally he says, here. And he started, how to buzz the mouthpiece, how to play C. This is C open, And so that's my earliest memory, was him introducing me to the trumpet. And I consider him responsible for actually all I am. My association with traditional New Orleans music began with my sister, who was a freedom rider and also very good friends with Alan Jaffe, who began Preservation Hall. So when the hall worked, she was actually the first employee. She was the first employee ever at that business. It was my great fortune to have come up when most of the people who are a part of the renaissance of New Orleans music were still playing, actively playing. Like Ernie Cagnolati, Kid Thomas, Percy Humphrey was my ultimate inspiration. Also, there were other trumpet players like Alvin Alcorn that I really admired. Yeah, and not just the trumpet players. I was also quite influenced by Paul Polo Barnes, who's a great clarinetist. Louis Nelson played trombone. In fact, most of the songs that I like to play now are from that era. Sweet Emma Barrett, Yeah, Chester's artists, Saeed Frazier. Another huge influence on me was Tuba Fat. When I first started to try to play outside of the brass band format was with Tuba Fat in a band called The Chosen Few. And it was a chosen few. There was only 4 people in the band, right? He'd have a piano player, he played tuba, I played trumpet, and his wife would sing. So that was the chosen few. So I learned a lot from Tuba, and I can never forget him. He was the epitome of New Orleans tuba players. If you listen to it now, there's not very many tuba players that actually play in that style. The one I could mention is Jeffrey Hills. And that's it. There's a lot of phenomenal tuba players, but they're not playing old style. They're not just playing the bottom. A lot of them is like they've outgrown the tuba. They're playing so much stuff on the tuba that sometimes I just want to stop playing. Just play the bottom, man. You don't have to go oompa oompa, but I don't need you to play all that stuff. It just doesn't go with what we're trying to do. It's a simplistic style of music that's so pretty. And the simplicity in it is what makes it so unique. You know, the collective improvisational aspect of it is what's so intriguing because it teaches you to listen so well. You got to listen. And that's a huge part of it, is that I'm listening to the clarinetist and the trombonist. I'm listening to everybody and trying to see where I fit. You're always in search of where you fit perfectly, and it's never the same. It's just never the same. That's what's intriguing to it. There's a lot of the same songs, but the presentation is never the same. Never. New Orleans music has a strange origin in that it really is derived from classical music. It's really the Grand Marquis, who was sent here from France to rule over this province. He was the first person to bring music from France to New Orleans. And he brought small string quartets to play at his gatherings. He was called the Grand Marquis for a reason, because he was grandiose and he wanted all this pageantry with him. And so in time, the trumpet actually took over from what was the original violin. And you'll find a lot of the musicians, when I was a kid, they were all string players as well. A lot of them played strings as well. In fact, Jack Willis, who was one of my teachers, also a contemporary of Danny Barker, he was in Danny's band. Jack Willis was a phenomenal arranger and writer. He's only known for playing trumpet, but he also played violin. There's a huge Afro-Caribbean sort of influence in New Orleans music. And you can hear it in lots and lots of songs. You mentioned Mama Inez, but it's also in lots of other ways. And in fact, I incorporate it in a lot of things. Like I do a Latinesque on a hill far away. It's an old rugged cross. We do that Latin-y, right? And lots of songs. Dance to the Mardi Gras. We play that Latinish. And a lot of that influence came from Danny Barker, because you don't hear it on a lot of his records, but he liked that. He liked that. I was really fortunate in that I came along in a time when he had a lot of time. He had a lot of time. Even though he was the founder and sort of the matriarch of the Fairview Band, and a lot of people in that band now are regular working musicians. Ephraim Towns, who was a trumpet player for the Dirty Dozen. Eddie Bo Paris, he was a great trombone player. Barry Turner, whose son is now a pro football player for the Carolina Panthers. He was a great drummer, and Danny used to say, he's got an African beat. And that he was a very different stylistically bass drummer. You know, with the brass band, you got 2 drums, so styles really make a difference. There are few bass drummers who really understand that. One is Catanio Hingle. To me, he's the top man, and you can't imitate that, and you can't teach it. He's told me he can't teach anybody to play like him because he doesn't know how he plays. It's instinctual. You don't, some things you get from being around it. There were so many bands, man. The Arm with the Tuxedo, the Olympia, Excelsior, even the Eureka band was still playing. So I was fortunate in that the music was, the city was saturated with music. It's nothing now compared to what it was. It's just almost non-existent compared to what it was. Of course, you had places like the Preservation Hall, the Palm Court, the Paddock, and the famous Door, and Maison Bourbon, but those were all touristy places. When I was a kid, they were everywhere. They were everywhere. They were on Franklin Avenue. You could get them on Claiborne, La Harpe Street. All over there was bands playing everywhere. And one of the fondest memory I have is my sister lived 924 Orleans. On the corner was Buster Holmes Restaurant. I don't know if you heard of it, but Buster Holmes was the best red bean man around. He was the red bean king. And at that time, you could for $1, you'd get a big plate of beans. For $1.50, you get beans and smoked sausage or hot sausage, right? But it was a haven for the musicians. Anytime you needed a band, you just went to Buster's, because all the musicians were there. They could get the best meal in town for $1. And then they all liked to hang out with each other. There was a huge camaraderie among the musicians, which sort of exists, but not nearly like it did. Stylistically, it's diverse now, whereas then there was much more traditional music. A lot of the brass bands played at venues. Yeah. Now, I was fortunate that I didn't just hear that. I also heard the music of Preservation Hall. I was much more fortunate than most of the guys I played with in terms of my association with other musicians, with being around them. I started hanging around Preservation Hall in 1968 when I was 6 years old. I was there every night. Our house was 2 blocks away. So even when I was a little kid, I would get to go for the first set. And then when they went on break the first time, my brother-in-law would walk me around the corner, put me in the bed, and then he'd go back within 15 minutes because it was only 2 blocks away. And so, I was lucky in a lot of regards. Another thing you asked about, a funny story. Tell you a couple. When I was a little older, like about 12 or 13, I used to get to call a break at the Preservation Hall. This is before CDs, right? So, and then you'd go in with the CD, with the album, you'd hold the album cover and says, Chester's Artist on bass, and then you'd introduce all the guys in the band. And then you say, the band will be back after a short 15-minute break. Then on the back of the CD, I'd have a blank piece of paper taped and a pencil. This is when there was a bar in the back. And so I would go in the back and fix the musicians their drinks and bring it back to them on a tray, right? And so once I leaned down, talking about Stacey Adams, I leaned down to Willie Humphrey to ask him what he wanted to drink, and I accidentally stepped on his shoe, right? Oh, man. And I was a kid, right? Then he grabbed me by the shirt. Boy, watch, that's Stacey Adams you stepping on. And he was really ticked off. And it kind of scared me and hurt my feelings a little bit. He pulls out his handkerchief, wipes his shoe off, because they didn't play that, man. They were really into how their presentation was huge to them. And Another about that same era was Sweet Emma. Sweet Emma, by the time I came, she had already had the stroke, right? And she was only one-handed. She only played piano with one hand. And she was in a wheelchair. And her son would pick her up at the end of the night, and he'd double park in the middle of the street, right in front of Preservation Hall with the van, and then he'd come in to get her out. Well, I just sort of took it on myself to sort of start helping him. Instead of having him having to get out the car, he could stay in the car and I would roll her out in the wheelchair. And boy, she'd be cursing me out and slapping me and everything. And I was trying to help her, right? Oh, she was just nothing sweet about her. No. Sweet Emma was not sweet. She was quite cantankerous, actually. I do her songs too. Yeah, I'm alone because I love you with all my heart. All those songs she sang, I do that with If Ever You're Lonesome, Just Telephone Me. All those are Sweet Emma songs. So yeah, that's where my influence came from, the piano players. In terms of vocal styling, because they were the only ones that would sing. Percy Humphrey would sing, but I never knew what the words were. I didn't know what he was saying, you know. The artist didn't know what he was saying either, but, you know, and nobody else in the band sang. So mostly it was always just the piano players who sang. And so that's sort of my influence with singing songs. The rhythm, the way it's syncopated, the way the emphasis is on the four and the and of the four, you know. That's sort of where the distinction is. I mean, you can listen to a lot of musicians that can play the melody and play the parts like they've heard on records, but if you don't have the right rhythm section, you're not going to get the same feeling. The feeling emanates from the rhythm, and that's what makes it so different than anything else. And it's not something that's taught, really. It's a lot of rhythmic patterns are based on a sort of marching music, kind of a militaristic type of 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, it's really so segmented, and New Orleans music is not that way. There's so many embellishments that go along with the in-between beat and on the up of the beat that really makes it unique in that most guys develop their own style. To me, it's the most important instrument in New Orleans jazz because it's the primary part of the song you know. Happy birthday to you, you know that melody, right? You might not know the chords that go along with it, but you know that melody. And so that's sort of what the trumpet is. The trumpet is the happy birthday of New Orleans music. You know, when the saints go marching in, right? So that's the role of the trumpet, is to play the melody. And I heard so many good melody players that it sort of gets in you, and I couldn't let it go. I remember when I was in like about 4th or 5th grade, I'd finished my work and there was a radiator. I don't know if y'all remember the old radiators that were the source of heat in school, right? So I'd be playing piano on the radiator. The teacher would always say, "What are you doing? What are you doing, boy?" And I would say, "Oh, nothing." But in my mind, I was thinking of the Saints or some other song, and like I was playing piano. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the road. For me, it is. For me, it is, because I come from an era that a lot of the musicians you hear didn't. I mean, there are older guys than me like Wendell and Greg who were around, but they're all trying to go forward. I'm trying to go backward. I'm not interested in being a modern trumpet player. I could care less about bop. It's not I just don't take to it. I would never care to play it. I've never tried to learn a bop lick in my life. Just not me, just not what I like. I don't have an interest in that. You know, they say my musical father was not Dizzy Gillespie. My musical father was Louis Armstrong. So I don't tend to try to play modern. It's not in my blood. It's every fiber in my being is musically related to the old style, to the roots of New Orleans music, which is simple melodies and variations on that, where the trumpet player is really just the facilitator of a loose melody, because nothing's played as exactly as written, and I could never play it twice anyway. I could never embellish it the same way twice anyway. My sound, my vocal style is really based on Sing Miller, who was a piano player at Preservation Hall. He was always my favorite singer, and he sang more than anybody else in that band. He was in the Percy Humphrey Band along with Willie and Jim Robinson, Slow Drag Power, Saeed Frazier, Norvin Kimball. And so my inspiration was Sing Miller. Everybody's style is really unique. And I think the thing about me is that I strive to play simple. I strive to play simple. I'm not trying to play a bunch of notes. For what? It's not called for. It doesn't make my sound any better. And I'm not trying to be out front, you know? It's a collective, so I have no interest in trying to play like Miles Davis or none of that. Which most of the guys are studying their ass off trying to get like that. And I'm like, that's good if you live in New York. For one thing, there's no market for that here. I know bop players that can't buy you a beer. Can't buy you a beer because there's no work here for them. There's no work here for them. They had the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra, but that was short-lived. I mean, they're still functioning. And there is a small market for it because, I mean, look at Snug Harbor. Snug Harbor's still in existence. I mean, friends of mine run that. And occasionally they'll get me to play there. But mostly it's straight ahead. And that's not New Orleans. It's not New Orleans. Actually, you can get bop anywhere. This you can't get anywhere. It's far more unique, far more pretty and simplistic. And that's what I like, the simple melodies. I like the unity and the camaraderie in the music. And that's what makes it what it is. The ensemble is what it's about. The musicians there were very distinguished gentlemen. Very distinguished gentlemen. You never saw them dressed, like this. They were always very, very well dressed. And Norvin Kimball was one of the best of the well dressed, right? Well, he was very cocky, brash, his chest stuck out very far. He was the kind of guy that let you know, I'm a bad such and such, and you better recognize it. In his dress, he was the first one I ever saw with silk socks, right? And he'd always be cuff-linked, gold chains, gold rings, right? And then when he got up to do a feature song, he'd always stand up and put one foot on a chair so that you could see he had the silk socks on and Stacey Adams. That was a staple of the musicians then. Stacey Adams were considered expensive. They were expensive. And when you had Stacey Adams, it was sort of a status symbol, It was, I've made it. It was sort of a statement like, I made it, And you got to understand that there was this may sound a little negative, and I don't really mean to do it, but it's the truth. There's a huge racial divide that was very apparent in this city. And so one of the things that I realized was that musicians sort of superseded that, I grew up with my sister in the French Quarter, but I went home to my parents who lived just in this night ward. If you take this street and go across Claiborne, and you'll see there's a whole different world. In fact, when I was a kid, you wouldn't come on this side. You wouldn't come, this was not, black people weren't allowed over here. If you came over here, you might get beat up. You might get beat up. There was a huge racial divide. You didn't go across St. Claude. No, it's a really racially polarized place. But I found that the musicians didn't have that. They were above that. It was one thing that really interested me was that being a musician gave you a chance for people to recognize that you were a person. They didn't see you as a black man, you know? They saw you as a black man, but as an artist. It made a huge difference. I could do things that my friends that grew up in my neighborhood could never. The church also had a building that they called the Annex, which was several blocks away from the church, but it was just a shotgun house that the church owned. And so we'd have rehearsal there every Saturday morning. Danny would bring his banjo. So we were fortunate in that he mandated rehearsals. So we had rehearsals every Saturday morning. And so we got to learn a lot of stuff. In fact, when our band started sort of not having to have Danny tell us what to do, was when Michael White came on the scene. You can see photographs when we were all this tall, Michael White's, he came up playing with us. We were kids and he was like almost a grown man. But we were the best band around for him to learn from. And initially in the band was Leroy Jones, Lucian Barbrand, Greg Stafford, Kevin Harris, who's with the Dirty Dozen, and then the second band was us. These guys were getting to be 17, 18, right? Time for them to sort of move on and start working professionally. Then came myself, Eddie Parrish, the guys I mentioned to you about. Often would have rehearsal, and then after that, we go to the French Quarter, what we call hustle, right? So to learn the songs we learned at practice, we would then go in the French Quarter and go play them and put the bucket down, right? And so a lot of my friends, and even through high school, had a job like at McDonald's or working at a fast food place, and I'd be laughing like, dude, I ain't doing that. I'd go on Saturday and make what you made for working at McDonald's all week. This was sponsored by the church. It was co-sponsored by the church. Every time we went out to hustle on Saturday, we could only keep the dollars. All of the change had to be brought back to him for the church. And once a month, he'd give the church 50 or 60 bucks or whatever. Like when I was a kid, Shannon and I played a lot. In fact, Shannon Powell and I go back before he was even playing drums, okay? How many people know that? He played tenor saxophone. Shannon and I used to hustle. We only knew two songs, Bourbon Street and the Saints. But we both went to the same school in the French Quarter of McDonald 15. So we leave and go straight to Jackson Square and just play the Saints until we got enough money to get beignets. Then we go get beignets, and that was the end of the day, you know? And that was the best time of some of the best times of my life, man. From the Fairview Band, I got my first professional job playing with the Doc Paulin Brass Band. Doc had 6 sons and they were all amazing. They were all amazing. His 2 sons played drums, son played tuba, other son played trombone, one son played trumpet, and then the most prominent of them is Roderick Paulin, who is all over playing with everybody now. And so when you got to be in that band, you were lucky because he didn't need you. It was a family band, but he had so much work that he actually had 3 bands. From that band came the Pinstripe. Doc would have 3 jobs at once, so you'd meet at his house, right? He lived uptown. What he called the A band could sit on his porch. Right? The A band sit on his porch until he come out and tell you what to do. The B band stood on the corner, and the C band, you go over there on that corner. And then the guys in the C band said, well, we're getting too many, Jock has too much work. And that's how the Pinstripe Brass Band got started. They were the C band for Doc Parlin. They were the ones he wouldn't let play with his family, you know? And so I can find memories of all that, man. Those great times. It's really like a fulfillment of everything my life is about. It's why I can't wait to stop working during the day so I can do what I really love, you know? I had a passion for teaching at one time, but it's so different now that it's not the same. So now my only passion is this. It's really where my heart is. It's where what I think about. It's like it's everything to me. I mean, if you look at, I was in a band called the Palmetto Bog Stompers, right? I joined this band to play with a great trombonist called Scotty Hill, who came up playing with Leroy, and he was just the closest thing to old style trombone tailgating that you could find. Yeah, and so I got in the band to play with Scotty Hill, and 2 weeks after he quit. And I stayed in that band 14 years. I only left because I had a young son, but Scotty Hill was a huge influencer too, because he taught me that there were so many songs that even I didn't know. And so if you look at that band, you can look them up, there's 6 or 7 recordings, 5 of them, every song on there is for me. Every song that's on those records is songs I brought to the band. Because they knew how to play the style, but they didn't know the songs. They wouldn't have known them because they weren't there and nobody's playing them anymore. In fact, it's sort of funny, and I guess they say flattery is the greatest form of respect. So everything that I played, if you go on Frenchman Street, you hear every band playing them. Every band's playing. Any song I'd come up with, I know a place to go. Nobody was playing that song. Now everybody's playing it. Everybody's playing. I'm like, wow, y'all just waiting for me to say something. And it's true. I mean, I'm not just blowing my own horn, because I'm not the most gifted musician, but my style lends itself to what we're trying to do and the way I approach it.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was laid. And I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will